Hello everyone, November 3rd, 2022. Are you planning to sponsor your loved one for Canadian permanent residency? What are the key elements to look out for to make sure your application is approved and not refused? Today we will be reviewing these details together with actual case studies. And again, today is a live session, so if you're watching a recording of this, um, and there's no special effects and it's pretty raw, it's because it's a live recording that we have every Thursday. My name is Reza and I work with the IRCC Canada immigration team helping applicants move to Canada, whether it's for their kids, family, businesses, or all of the above. I'm not an actual full-time YouTuber, but I work hands-on with our licensed immigration team, working on actual applications and representing our clients with the IRCC, whether it's overseas correspondence or inside Canada. And if you're thinking about immigrating to Canada, well, we do break down the barriers between countries so you can study, work, and invest in any destination country of your choice. We're licensed and we help applicants just like yourself. So let's get started. We're going to be looking at spousal, common law, and conjugal partner relationships. If you're a Canadian citizen and or a Canadian permanent resident, you can sponsor your common law or spouse or conjugal partner for Canadian PR, of course. Your spouse or partner can either be overseas or inside of Canada, but be aware, if you're in common law relationship and you're not together, this can be a red flag in IRCC and create issues for you during your sponsorship case, because common law means consecutively living together under one roof, co-inhabiting for at least 12 months. And if there's a big gap, then that throws the whole thing into disarray. We're just going to make sure we're all good to go to proceed to the next key points about spousal sponsor. So here's some key highlights about this program if you're relatively new, and then we'll do a deep dive into case studies. Canadian family sponsorship is one of the most effective programs for PR processing. Even with the huge backlog of IRCC, they have always prioritized the key categories of family sponsorship, especially spousal and dependent children, under the pilot program for dependent children or dependents. Unless you live in Quebec, there's no minimum income requirement to sponsor your partner or spouse. Keep in mind that you should not be on social welfare unless it's for disability support. There's no language, minimum assets, or education requirements, of course. And keep in mind that any serious criminality on behalf of the sponsor can make you ineligible as well. Even if your spouse or partner is completely out of status inside of Canada, so being illegal for even years, you can convert them from inside Canada to PR through this sponsorship program, completely legal. You could be a Canadian citizen living abroad with your spouse or common law and sponsor them from outside, but with intention and proof that you will return and reside in Canada with your spouse or partner when the application has been approved. The genuineness of the relationship and supporting documents is the most important factor for IRCC when processing any of these types of sponsorships. Canada does recognize arranged marriages based on your cultural and religious backgrounds. However, they do not recognize proxy relationships or marriages, which are basically not in person, or polygamy, which means having multiple spouses, even if it's accepted in your own culture. They also don't recognize marriages with minors, even if in your home country it's completely allowed. They will not recognize that. And to compare it to the US program for spousal sponsorship, the US doesn't recognize conjugal or common law relationships for immigration purposes, and minimum income is required as a sponsor in the US no matter where you are in the US, whichever state. As well, in the US, you cannot sponsor somebody from inside the country if they are illegal, which means they're out of status without any visas. Right now, the typical processing times we're seeing is anywhere from 5 months to 12 months to apply and receive a decision for the PR processing of your sponsored partner or spouse. We've had cases where they've applied in February and received a confirmation in September, and then the PR processing goes after that decision. We've had work permits from inside of Canada now. So during COVID, it was super slow. It was literally taking 11 months. But work permits for spouses who are being sponsored or partners being sponsored from inside of Canada is now around 5 months as well. So 4.5, 5 months, which is great. So it means it is a priority for IRCC, and these applications are ongoing all the time. So that's the typical processing we're seeing, but with certain overseas applications, if they're a little bit more complicated, you can expect a 12-month standard processing time. The best way to understand if your case is strong enough to pass the test of the IRCC in terms of genuineness of the relationship, and for them not to state that you, the person being sponsored, went into this relationship purely to gain status in Canada. So that's for the person being sponsored, which is termed as in IRCC as relationship of convenience, quote unquote. So the best way to avoid that is to actually review cases of refusals and understand the decision-making process and reasoning of the IRCC officers looking at those files. This is why we will be reviewing a few cases today for you to extract key information to help you make a better application during your sponsorship process. And a small disclaimer here, these are not actually our own clients because we wouldn't be revealing their information in the first place. And this information is public and it's posted on the CanLII website as actual cases in Canadian federal courts. Anyone has access to these, right? And we're using them as case studies, as examples to inform and educate our audience, okay? So that was our legal disclaimer. So one of the cases we can look at is Harpreet Singh versus Canada. So he got married through an arranged marriage in India, okay? Soon after, his wife, Mrs. Kaur, received an approval for a study permit to go to Canada. Harpreet applied for a spousal open work permit to join his wife in Canada twice. Once in January 2019 when he was also interviewed, and then another one in March 2019 where he was interviewed in May of 2019. His second application again was refused. So he's got 2 refusals on a spousal open work permit. Why is this important? Well, it's because similar concerns for spousal sponsorship would be raised by IRCC officers that they did on this specific spousal open work permit because of this marriage. So there's some notes from the officer on this case. Upon review of your application, previous interview and current interview, I have noted discrepancies in the information you have provided. For example, whether an engagement occurred or not, the dates of your first meeting your spouse, and when you declared your spouse applied for her study permit. Because the truthfulness of this information forms a key part of your reason for entering Canada on a spousal open work permit, I'm concerned that this misrepresentation was liable to induce an error in the administration of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, and that you are therefore inadmissible to count for misrepresentation. The applicant's evidence of a chat history with Mrs. Kaur, his spouse, following their wedding also does not disclose that the couple exchanged substantive communication about their daily activities, their future plans, their career aspirations, or any other elements of an anticipated shared life together, right? When asked about what he knew about his spouse, the applicant could only reply that she likes ice cream and quote unquote to go around places. These responses do not disclose that the applicant has learned anything of substance about his wife. So if you're wondering why I'm explaining this case, well, the officer is undermining the whole marriage in the first place. So if they went in for a spousal sponsorship, let's say the wife was a Canadian citizen or a PR inside Canada who was sponsoring her husband, these would be the kind of criteria they would be looking at, and these would be very similar to the refusal, except the misrepresentation. A lot of the times they will not use misrepresentation for spousal sponsorship. However, these are the types of concerns that they would have on the relationship, on the sponsorship, if this was a sponsorship case. That's why we're using it as an example. So the genuineness of the marriage relationship is crucial for any application concerning your spouse or partner. And similarly, for a spousal open work permit, it's an interesting fact. You'll be interviewed for a spousal sponsorship as well. And we do see a lot of these interviews going on in India and Pakistan. It is crucial to be truthful and answer in any way that is clear, concise, and easy to understand. It is your responsibility to provide enough information for the officer to make a positive decision, right? So you could understand how being interviewed and not knowing enough about your relationship, your better half, your partner or spouse, can create doubts and hence lead to a refusal. In that case, it's a spousal open work permit, but that could have been a spousal sponsorship, perhaps. Here's another case, Batu versus Canada. So the refusal reasons were applicant seeks a judicial review on a decision by the Immigration Appeal Division, which is the first level of appeals after a, let's say, a family application refusal. IRCC believed the applicant's husband's primary purpose for entering the relationship was to obtain immigration status in Canada. As I said, that's the relationship of convenience, quote unquote. The argument is IAD, on behalf of the applicant who's appealing or applying for judicial review, is that the Immigration Appeal Division failed to consider relevant evidence of the primary purpose for entering the relationship and failed to examine the portion of the evidence that addressed the genuineness of the marriage. Applicant is 49 years old, Canadian, 2 children from a previous marriage, who married Mr. Gill, or Mrs. Gill, I'm not sure, 30-year-old Indian national in February of 2019, right? Yeah, probably it was a she Canadian and a he Indian. And the potential red flags here for the officer. So pay close attention to this. Why did the officer refuse this case? Before the marriage, Mr. Gill had a history of making 9 TRV applications. So that means 9 temporary resident visa applications. So it could be visitor visas, study permits, work permits, which were all refused between October 2013 to 2018. My God, people, please don't apply 9 times and get refused. Okay, they met when applicant traveled to India in October 2018, right? So that's how the two met. They had a private wedding where there were no families attended. They then lived together in India for 2 weeks before the applicant, the sponsor, and the actual applicant who's being sponsored came back to Canada, right? Well, not the spouse that was being sponsored, but the Canadian side of the spouse, the relationship, returned back to Canada after 2 weeks. They both attended interviews in November 2019, later refusal letters in January of 2020, and the refusal reasons by RCC were Mr. Gill's intentions in entering the given marriage, his 9 previous TRV applications to Canada, Mr. Gill's insufficient personal knowledge of the applicant. So after those interviews and those questions they did at the interview, a lack of compatibility in terms of age and marital status, marital history. So they look at the age difference, they look at your cultural background, they look like your ethnicity and your religious background, right? They look at, does it make sense? The applicant's credibility based on the secrecy of the marriage and a related police protection order, likely obtained to explain the lack of participation of Mr. Gill's family in the development of the relationship and wedding rather than the result of a genuine fear of his family, right? So a little bit of a twisted case, to be honest with you. And that just shows you that it has to be logical. And if no family is attending a wedding, there's the genuineness of the relationship can come under question, and especially during the interview. Plus, if you're marrying somebody who's, or in a common law, who's had 9 refusals to come to Canada before, and then the genuineness is also not solid, of course, it's ready for refusal. The reasons, and however, the courts granted judicial review to hear the case, right? So what they said, which is interesting, is that the IAD, Immigration Appeal Division, placed too much weight on Mr. Gill's previous TRV applications and his motivation to come to Canada. Most individuals seeking to come to Canada are highly motivated to do so. This says little about whether a particular marriage is genuine, quote unquote, paragraph 19. IAD's finding the police protection order was obtained to provide an excuse for the lack of family presence at the wedding is not justified. I find that the testimonies showed that the couple was concerned their decision to marry could spark an unpredictable response from Mr. Gill's family. Specifically, Mr. Gill testified that he obtained a petition for a police protection order because he feared his family would disapprove of the marriage due to their significant age difference. I also find that the objective country condition evidence of violence from families in India towards couples who married under similar circumstances demonstrated that this fear was genuine and reasonable. Given the evidence before the Immigration Appeal Division, such as the extensive communication between the applicant, which is the sponsor in Canada, and Mr. Gill before their marriage, the statement from the applicant's children, and the couple's hesitancy to involve their families in the wedding for fear that they would disapprove, I do not find the AID adequately accounted for the context of the application of the applicant and Mr. Gill's lives when analyzing the development of the relationship. So this is what the court basically has reasoned and allowed this case to be heard in federal court. So the key takeaways are: always request an ATIP, so the refusal notes, if you receive a refusal, to fully understand why your application is being refused, whether it's a visitor visa, study permit, work permit, or a PR application, such as this. Visa officers are human. No matter how hard they try, it's hard to be without bias. If you have a record of refusals, it's important to present the information with more than the minimum required supporting documents, so giving context to the officer. Organize your application so that it is easy to review, it makes sense if you want to appeal to the decision, and you have provided more than enough documents to support your case, right? So the point here is that don't give the minimum documents. If there's certain red flags in your case, review it and make sure that you provide the logic behind it and the supporting documents, because you really don't want to go through this court procedure, this whole judicial, like imagine Immigration Appeal Division, judicial review, and then a federal court hearing, right? To go through all that is expensive and time consuming. If you do your job and do the application correctly, or your legal representative, you don't need to go through all this. So this last one is a bit more complicated case. Again, not our client, but public information. Good for everyone to understand that being transparent and truthful is important in all application. It's Clark versus Canada. So here's a bit of a background. Applicant is a Jamaican citizen and PR of Canada since 2017. His mother moved to Canada in 1990, and the applicant met later on Mrs. Clark's second wife, who already had 2 children of her own from a previous marriage. They moved in together in 1999 and had a son together. Okay, so far we have this Canadian gentleman having a second wife and moving together and having a son. First marriage. So in 2005, the main applicant's mother, so the Canadian sponsor, told him a woman in Canada, wife number 1, is willing to marry him and sponsor him for PR, and he landed in 2007 as PR with his son. So he divorced her in 2018 and married the second wife in 2009. Okay, so this is the first marriage. The sponsorship application that's under question now is he applied to sponsor now Mrs. Clark in 2010, which resulted in the investigation by IRCC. This resulted in him losing his PR. He continued to live in Canada without status with his son as a PR, with his son. So he then received a PR again in 2017 when he filed under humanitarian compassionate grounds. Then he applied to sponsor Mrs. Clark for the second time. So imagine this. He lost his status as a PR after trying to sponsor somebody himself. And then he became a PR through agency. Then he applied to sponsor somebody else for his second wife. So the reason for refusal is marriage not genuine. Refused based on new relationship, quote unquote. 4.1 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulation, which is for the purposes of this regulation, a foreign national shall not be considered a spouse, a common law partner, or a conjugal partner of a person if the foreign national has begun a new conjugal relationship with that person after a previous marriage, common law partnership, or conjugal partnership with that person was dissolved, primarily so that the foreign national, another foreign national, or the sponsor could acquire any status privilege under the act. So basically means, that was a very legal term, that they cannot be considered in a relationship if they were already in a relationship before, but they got back together for the purposes of basically getting immigration. At the hearing, the applicant admitted that his marriage to his first wife was not genuine. That's how he lost his first PR. He claimed responsibility for this and apologized. He also stated that he paid for his mistakes with the loss of his permanent residency status, which was later regained through the humanity and compassion grounds, and subsequent finding of inadmissibility resulting in him being unable to travel to Jamaica to see his second wife, quote unquote, Mrs. Clark, for about 7 years. Previously, and after regaining his status in 2017, the applicant regularly traveled then back to Jamaica to see his second wife, Mrs. Clark. So the decision by the Immigration Appeal Division, applicant's relationship was dissolved in 2007 with Mrs. Clark when he married the first wife. So do you see that? He had a relationship with her, then he married somebody just to get a PR or give, right, to, and then he lost his PR, that relationship dissolved, and then when he got his PR, he went back and married Mrs. Clark. And basically what happened is that they did not allow for this appeal at the IAD. Had an ongoing obligation to answer all questions to the immigration truthfully and until the applicant's admission at the hearing. This has not been done. So this was the reasoning why they did not approve of this appeal. Had he previously disclosed his ongoing relationship with Mrs. Clark and lack of dissolution of the relationship despite his marriage to his first wife, he may have been further examined by Canadian immigration as a result of his misrepresentation about both his ongoing relationship with her and his marriage to his first wife. Legitimate lines of investigation were cut off to Canadian immigration, and the IAD further found the purpose of the marriage was, the purpose of Section 4.1 is exactly this, to prevent people from getting into these relationships. A foreign national cannot formally dissolve a common law relationship, but informally maintain that relationship so that they're able to enter a marriage of convenience to obtain PR status in Canada, and then turn around and formalize the ongoing relationship as if it's a new relationship. Accepting the applicant's counsel interpretation of Section 4.1 would defeat the purpose of this whole legislation. So key takeaways: be honest. If you have made a mistake such as misrepresentation, it is important to consult with a legal professional to figure out what your options are. And you can't just jump around in relationships and marriages and go back and forth, okay? Moral of the story, folks. I hope with this session today, I've been able to educate everyone a little bit about what the IRCC is looking for, what you should and should not do in a spousal or partner sponsorship application, and making sure you have all your supporting documents when trying to prove the genuinity of the relationship. What are you waiting for? I mean, it's time to apply. You should start your sponsorship application as soon as possible if you're ready, because it's quick, and this government is prioritizing those applications. So let's look at some questions right away in the next 2 minutes. And if you're thinking about immigrating to Canada, investment, business, work, sponsorship, studies, or skilled immigration, you're at the right place. We only guarantee one key point for you, which will be you will know what to expect, your risks, everything clearly laid out for you, and where you can expect 100% support from our office as our client. No surprises, just results. And if you didn't know, we have a $1 million liability insurance, which protects you and us from fraud and mistakes. We've got a dedicated client trust account in Canada with our Canadian banks, 8 languages that our team speaks, 47 countries, clients from 47 countries. And if you need a free email assessment, click on the link below this video. And if you want a one-on-one consultation with me or any of my team members, you can book the consultation link again in the description of this video. If you have questions, we're here on our weekly live schedule on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We do answer questions that are posted on our YouTube. We are unable to see the Facebook, Instagram comments and questions during our live, and we're here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yes, we're here, folks, answering your questions. So let's start from the top, go down. And if you're watching a recording of this, well, there's a whole bunch of people asking questions and comments, and we're going to go through that on our YouTube channel, okay? So Nasrin Ibrahimi says, hello, Reza June, El Nino June. Yes, Rosita June, how are you? Chinyero Guebuba, a bunch of greetings to you, Sir Reza. Chinyero, I always love to see you at the top of the comments whenever we're live. Najat Hassan says, good morning, sir. Merry Christmas in advance. Thank you, Najat. A little bit too advanced, but I'll take it. My AM sponsored my husband. Okay, I sponsored my husband in Egypt. Everything completed. Medical done in February 15th. Until now, still waiting for visa. Do you know how long it will take? Wow, that's a long time. February to November. And after the medical was done. Interesting. I've seen, so Nejat, I've seen that in Egypt, it takes longer to process. I don't know why, but it's taking longer with spousal sponsorship in Egypt, typically, right? I've even seen cases up to 18 months. I don't know why. I cannot comment on it. When did you originally apply for, was it when in 2020 or 2021 did you apply? Let me know. Noor Walid says, can SUV applicants flagpole for their work permits? Yes, any work permit can be flagpoled. Be aware, readers and viewers, please be aware and have caution on this note. The CBSA officers at the border have full discretion, okay, in terms of giving you your work permit. But yeah, if you go in and, hopefully you won't have any issues crossing, doing that flag polling. There's the risks that you should be aware of. Yes, any work permit can be flagpole because the key is you're picking up the work permit on arrival to Canada. So you got to exit and come back. So, but you got to be very careful with this. Milan Omar Shah says, hi Reza, I'm an SUV application currently in Canada. I have advised that I can do a flag pulling from my SUV work permit. Okay. We went to the Rainbow Bridge and they said, go to Lewiston, Queenston Bridge. Yeah, so that's the problem. Exactly, folks. Flag pulling, lots of uncertainty. But it's possible in theory, but if you get the wrong CBSA officer, then you're waste of time. But Lewiston, Queenston Bridge said flag pulling is not done for SUV applicants. Well, the key is here, my question is that, is it possible to apply for an SUV applicant? We were advised only to apply either inland, online, or from home country. So what happens is you cannot apply from inland. You have to flagpole and then you have to exit and come back. So typically, if you apply from your home country, you're picking up your work permit on arrival. To be honest, I have not seen many applicants going for a flagpole for SUV. Okay, in theory it's possible, but probably, this is my guess, the CBSA officers have not seen it either. So they're just like passing the buck. They're like, oh, go somewhere else. I'm sure if you try enough bridges or ports of entry, one of them will accept. But again, exiting and coming back is the key. And if you can't exit because you don't have a visa for the US, then again, the CBSA officers can use their discretion. In theory, it's possible, but whether it's been done successfully, I don't know, because most of our SUV applicants, they don't flagpole, and the CBSA officers have probably not seen a lot of flagpoling. Hence, for them to pass the buck and be like, no, 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 no. But to be honest with you, in any work permit application, postgraduate work permit, spousal open work permit, closed work permit, there's no regulation saying you cannot flagpole or you can flagpole. Work permit is a work permit, okay? You're either allowed to apply from inside or you have to apply from outside, okay? You did the application and then on entry, you pick up the work permit. The key with flagpoling is you got to exit and come back, which could be technically not flagpoling. It's exiting and coming back. In that case, it should be possible in theory. But anyways, not many people have tried it, and you're probably one of the very few that have and seen the result of that. Lutz Schaefer says, hello Reza, Thank you for your insightful advice. How much does age difference count? 30 years raise red flags? Yes, Lutz. It depends on the culture, the ethnicity, the background. Is 30-year gap in a spousal or common law relationship normal? Is it accepted? Is it common? Right? And if it's not, they're going to dive deeper. And therefore, your genuineness supporting documents of the relationship are as critical. If you've only known each other for 6 months or 3 months or 8 months, then yeah, that's going to be a major red flag. So again, each case is different. Adel Ramos says, my son received a study permit, but its conditions say he can only go to primary secondary school. Yeah, he already finished high school and already has a letter of acceptance or admission from a college. What should we do? Okay, so Adel, I assume he did. He finished his high school in Canada, and that's why he has that study permit. Now, if he's moving on to college, he needs a new study permit. So with that letter of admission, you apply from inside Canada. Hey, now I'm continuing to college. I need a new study permit. You cannot study at post-secondary with a high school or elementary school type study permit. Okay. And you have to make sure you meet all the conditions to continue to apply for the study permit from inside Canada. But again, I'm assuming, Adel, that your son has completed high school inside Canada. If not, then yeah, that you gotta explain to me, right? But in theory, that's how it goes. Ejiro Igby lived in India 2016 and applied for visitor visa and was refused based on India is not my home country. Can this affect any of my future visa applications? Yes, it could. Any refusal, Ejiro, can affect your future applications, right? So when you're not a resident of that country, or if you're temporary of that country, then they will look at your ties to your home country, okay? And I don't really recommend applying, especially from India, if you're not Indian, okay? She-Rook's channel. Okay, hi Reza. My friend applied for her daughter's visitor visa from March of this year and have not heard from IRCC. She's from Jamaica. Okay. Quick question: your friend, is she a Canadian or she's a temporary like student or worker applying for her thing? And we've seen cases from February which is still being pending. So Kingston, the embassy in Kingston is super slow right now. They're not prioritizing. However, you need to literally just send them emails and web forms every 2 weeks after the standard processing time has passed. Okay. Najat Hassan says, in case you ask, it was submitted on September 9th, 2021 with the help of a consultant. Okay. So it typically takes a year, Najat, but I've seen Egypt take up to 18 months. But usually, as I said, we've had cases that were done very fast, but it's very regional, Najat, about spousal sponsorship. Some areas, it's super fast. As I said, like 5-6 months. Some places a year. Some places I've seen that's taken longer, and Egypt was one of those. Again, have they completed an interview? I assume not. But again, you've got to follow up with your consultant for him to push and request an update from IRCC. But again, I've seen a lot of cases taking longer than 12 months from Egypt. Adel Ramos says, my son received a study permit, but his condition says he can only go to primary school. He already finished high school. Yeah. So please give me more information, Adel, on your son. Let me see if she has. Yeah. Thanks. My son finished high school in the Philippines, went to Canada as my dependent, and given study permit. He received LOA from DLI while already in Canada, so my son needs to apply for a new study permit. Yeah, so as a dependent, you will only get a study permit if your children are in elementary or high school. It's not for post-secondary. As a dependent child, they have to be independent going into post-secondary. So there's like a confusion there, Adel. You do need a new study permit for post-secondary. Okay. Going back to the questions here, Safa Salah Ahmad Al Bahrani. The 1.5 million immigrants will be traveled to Canada during the 3 coming years. What the ratio of SUV from this number? Safa, I'm doing a video, releasing it next Wednesday with an in-depth analysis of the 3-year immigration plan and what it really means. Okay, so tune in next Wednesday for that. And that's where I'll actually dive deep and I'll analyze it, because it's one thing to say, wow, all these immigrants are coming. Do you know where they're going to be coming from? Well, I do. And I'm going to tell you guys in that video, because we're doing an in-depth analysis of that. So stay tuned, but very good question. Safa Salamat says, I will get a closed work permit and my spouse will get an open work permit and we will submit for permanent residency. Any differences between these two types of work permit in terms of the processing time of the PR? Well, closed and open work permits are different. Typically, they should be approved together, but I've seen cases where one is approved before the other. It depends on the embassy. It's really, it's all based on luck, but technically, in theory, it should be approved together. Is the time of processing closed work the same as open? Yeah, it depends on the category of work permit. If you're inside or outside of Canada, and if it's like a postgraduate work permit, right? Is it a spousal open work permit? But typically closed work permits are similar processing times, open work permits as well. Typically they're in the same range, plus minus 1.5 months. Okay. Ashok Sharma says, how soon can I claim siblings points in my CRS score after his landing in Canada after a COPR? You can, as soon as he receives your confirmation of PR, Ashok, you can claim it, because being a PR starts from the date you receive your confirmation of PR. The PR card is a separate note and it takes about 3 months, okay? But you can claim it on the date of the confirmation of PR. Zakan says, my fiance came from Colombia, has a temporary resident visa already, but we have just been waiting for his daughter's temporary resident visa since July. They processed another temporary resident visa application submitted after ours. What can we do? Not much you can do, Zakan, on a visitor visa. Applications are slow. You just have to keep on going at it. You may have to wait up to 6 months, but you gotta, right after the standard processing time is over, as per the published times on the IRCC website, start emailing the embassy and sending web forms, okay? Leili Reza says, hello, hello back. David Kebede says, Canada spouse sponsor interview in Divkalte. Canada spouse sponsor interview. It's Divkalte. Okay, I don't know what the question is, David. Canada spouse sponsor interview. It's Divkalte. Yeah, I don't know what that question is. Just reword it, retype it. I'll answer it. Utkarsh Nigam says, hey, I'm a non-student direct stream student who received a biometrics validity in September. Usually people get their decision with the letter. Is this a technical glitch? I'm worried. Okay. Okay, good question, Utkarsh. I've seen that happen before. They're doing more scrutiny on your application. Typically, I've actually handled a case like that where there was like a 1 month gap or 2 month gap between the biometrics and that. If it goes closer to your intake period, then maybe it's lost or forgotten. You got to start sending them messages. But it has happened rarely, and it could be that they're diving deeper into your application. Again, each case is different, but take that caution as like that note. Adobe Munonie. Good day, sir. Please, I lived in Ukraine some years ago. How can I get my PCC from Ukraine now that there is a war, or I will be waived for me? You can explain, Adobe. So you can explain, give an explanation. Put effort into it, like correspond with embassies, Ukrainian embassies, see what they respond and show proof of your efforts, and then an explanation, and IRCC will make a decision whether they will accept it. It should be fine, but again, you've got to show effort that you've made, not just, oh, there's a war, I'm not even going to try. Adel Ramos says, thanks. Yeah, so we already answered that. She Rocks channel says, I've also applied for my visitor visa from August of this year, so it's been 3 months and I have yet to hear from the IRCC. I should mention it's a renewal since I had the Canadian visa before. It depends, She Rocks channel, on the embassy that's processing, and visitor visas are super slow right now. Doesn't matter where you're doing it, they are so slow right now, super slow. So 3 months is nothing. You gotta wait longer. Shimla Mirchi couple. Hi, I'm an actress and commercial model based in India, and my husband is a fashion photographer and filmmaker in India. What would be the best and fastest way to come together? Well, Shimla Mirchi, this is the answer to your question. For the permanent residency, I would go under the federal self-employed program, but that takes up to 2 years and does not have a work permit. However, what you can do is you can actually set up a business in Canada, right? Come on a work permit under a federal entrepreneur work permit like a C10 or C11 under significant social or cultural or economic benefit for Canada. And at the same time, or just within a few months gap, apply for your self-employed PR program. And that will take 2 years, right? While you're in Canada with your work permit. That's my suggestion. And that's just based on the information I have at this point. And it's just a suggestion. Shirak Shana, my friend is Jamaican, but she has a Canadian visa. Yeah, Shirak, so I've seen cases since February for visitor visas still pending from Jamaica. Adel Ramos says, thanks, Reza. When my son applies for a new study permit, does he need to create a new account in the IRCC portal as independent, or can he use existing account as my dependent? Good question, Adel Ramos. I would say start with a new IRCC portal, but I'm not sure if it's possible. So I can't answer that clearly, but I would say start with a new one. They will have the application. You're using the same UCI, unique client identifier. So you can use a new portal. I'm not sure if, typically we wouldn't use the same portal, so I'm not sure if the old portal would still work for somebody who's applying as a non-dependent. Okay, if you're doing a PR, he would probably be a dependent, but now it's a study permit and he's going post-secondary. So I would suggest to do a new portal. Zakan says, I'm a Canadian citizen. I contacted my member of parliament to ask them to follow up on the application. They said they could assign a caseworker to our application. Yeah, that would be a good to do. They can just follow up, and as I said, you got to use all means possible. Email, web form, MP, whatever you can do, do it. She rocks. Shana Reza, why is Kingston not being prioritized? I don't know, Shirok. It's Jamaica. I don't know what's happening in Kansas. It could be load balancing. Maybe they're giving other applications to Kingston. Who knows? IRCC is very secretive. They're like the CIA of Canada. I think the security agency in Canada is less secretive than the IRCC. If you agree with me, press the like button. Ashok Sharma says, can I claim siblings points in my CRS score as soon as he gets a COPR and he's outside Canada? Okay, so he's got to have his confirmation up here. And if he's outside Canada, he's got to be a resident of Canada. So we need to show proof of residency in Canada. If they're non-resident outside, it won't work. Safa Salah Ahmed Al-Bahrani says, thanks, Reza. I cannot wait till our next video for 1.5 million immigrants. Yeah, Safa, it sounds better than it is. Trust me. Utkarsh Nigam says, can I use your services to contact IRCC since you said my application is forgotten? My university is going to ask for a study permit in December. I applied in August. I need a decision soon. Utkarsh, I didn't say it's forgotten. I'm just saying it does happen 1 to 2 months gap. Rarely happens, right? So right now you're at close to 2 months. After the 2 month period, I think in 15th November, start sending messages to the embassy because it's a regular study permit and web forms. And keep proof of that, because what will happen is you need to show all that proof to your school that you've attempted to correspond with IRCC and you've attempted to get a response, the last correspondence you've received. So start sending messages as soon as possible, 15th November onwards. But I don't know if it's forgotten or lost, but just be careful and maybe start at the 15th. Wait for 2 months. Najad Hassan, they better give him his visa before February 15th. Otherwise, his medical will get expired 15th of 2022, and the application will be 1.5 months since submitted. 1.5 years If not, I will move to Egypt forever. I'm done with this. Yes, Najat, I agree with you, by the way, on that last part. I agree with you. Send messages to the embassy. Wake them up, Najat, and send messages to the embassy through web form as well. Talk to your MP, member of parliament, and say this is BS. Okay, get a response. I'm sure if you put pressure now, you'll get a response. Okay. Well, Utkar says, what is the IRCC email that I can use to remind them of my application? Search IRCC embassies, go to the embassy. I assume you're in Delhi, the embassy in Delhi, and then send an email plus a web form. Layli Reza says yes. Utkar says yes. Ashok says yeah. Everyone's saying yes. Again, if you believe the IRCC is too secretive and probably one of the most secretive government organizations in Canada, press the like button, okay? Utkar says, my brother is in Canada. Can he call IRCC on my behalf since foreigners can't call? Only people from inside Canada. Yeah, call. Maybe, he needs to be authorized. So he can call, okay, and he could be an authorized representative for you. But you need to upload, okay, a use of representative authorization form through web form with his name, your signature, as an unpaid representative family member. Otherwise, if he says he's your brother, they're not really going to give him information, okay? And you can always call together, like he calls and then you join, and then you're on the call together. That could be another method. Ashok Sharma says, in continuation of my earlier question, can I claim siblings points in my search as soon as he lands in Canada? Yes, but again, in theory, yes, but we need to have those documents, Ashok. The residency, like where is he living? Like proof that he's residing in Canada. That will be just to make sure that you gain the points and your express entry application will not be refused, okay? M Plus says, hey, how long will it take after medical exam for spousal sponsorship? Outline Canada, average. Average, there is no average M Plus. Right now, we just had a little chat with Najat who said she's had her medical since February 2022 for her overseas spouse. Still no news. I've had other cases from other regions of the world which have taken 5 months all in, right? So you've got to be careful of where the application is being processed in terms of where you're applying from. Most of these applications are processed in Sydney and then they're passed on to the Sydney, Nova Scotia. And if they're from outside of Canada, not from inside. Inside Canada goes to Mississauga, I believe. But then they go to the embassy for further processing. So it's a combination of Sydney and the embassy. Okay? So there's really no average, literally. Again, folks, Utkarsh has another question. North Africa. Okay. Well, I would say it's going to take a long time, M+. I can't say what, but North Africa seems to be way longer than other regions. Paris office. Okay. Going through Paris. I can't really comment. I haven't seen any recent cases for that region through the Paris office, so I'm not sure. I can't comment on the average. Is it advisable? So Utkarsh is asking, is it advisable to call the IRCC from outside Canada? I have a mobile app that gives me access to the Canadian number. I can do that myself, but won't it be suspicious that a foreigner is calling? No, I mean, to give it a try, Utkarsh, I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it's free. Give it a call. Just take some of your time. Just say, hey, this is Utkarsh, and I'm following up, and and if they say, well, are you inside of Canada? I don't think they'll ask you, but just do that. Or get your brother. If you want to be 100% certain, get your brother involved because he's inside of Canada. But again, who knows? IRCC call centers, it's pretty bad, right? Getting a proper answer, it might be pretty useless. M+ says, thank you. No problem, M+. Sorry, I couldn't help you much. Karen Joy Katin says, is it conjugal is working? Yeah, conjugal relationships can work. Just have to make sure your application is solid, rock solid. Okay? Folks, we are going to sign off. So, Haveyo Rashid says, how long does it take to in Ethiopia, please? I have no clue, Haveyo, but in Africa, it's taking longer than, certain regions. Okay, but I've heard of no cases from Ethiopia recently, so I cannot comment or give you any incorrect information. Thank you, folks. We'll be back. So next Thursday, 11 a.m. North America Eastern Standard Time, which is local time, New York, Miami, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto. We will release our video next Wednesday on the latest immigration plan that you've all heard of and heard, but we're going to do a deep dive analysis, a critique of this plan. Is it real? Is it all fluff? Or is there substance to it? Because like, who can trust government? You know, oh, we're going to do that. Are they really going to do it? Will they have enough time? Will they stay in power to implement the plan? These are all questions we're going to answer next week. Utkarsh, thank you again. Karan, thank you. Ashok says, and please also, how soon the proof of residence can be obtained? Well, they go and get a lease, Ashok. Like, I don't know, they have a place of residence, a utility bill, a driver's license, a health card, whatever, right? Something just to prove, hey, I'm here, I'm living here. I've got a health card, for example. I've got a residential address, proof of that. You can get that within very quickly, within weeks. Everything IRCC does seems like a fluff. Yeah, it does with cars, doesn't it? Thank you, sir. No problem. And Nejad, I completely agree with you. I have a lot of clients who are as upset as you are as well. Thank you, folks. We're back next week. Tune in for our produced video on Wednesday and our regularly scheduled Thursday live sessions. I cannot see anything on Instagram, Facebook in terms of comments and questions, although it is streamed live. Everything is here on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, folks. We're back next week to help everyone out, and stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye now.